I am originally from Las Vegas, born and raised, and have been a huge fan of comic books since I was like 13. And growing up, I kind of thought I was going to be a comic book artist, and because I couldn't think of a better job. It just seemed like I don't know. How many of you love comics? Anybody like comics? Oh, right on, good. So there's two of you. Graduated from Art Center and was looking for a project to do. One of the things they tell us at Art Center is you should have a personal project all the time. You should do something for yourself, because what happens, and you'll find this when you get out, is you burn out rather quickly doing only other people's work. And so I started a project. I was a huge fan of comics, but I was also a huge fan of science fiction, fantasy books. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool to do portraits of science fiction fantasy authors? Does anyone read science fiction fantasy? Of course not. I was going along without any idea what I was going to do with this project, but I guess I've always had this very serendipitous life where I would decide I'm going to do something without any idea how it was going to end, but I would just go do it whenever I could, kind of thing. And so, but I did get to meet some pretty cool people. This is John Landis. He's a director. He directed, unfortunately, the Twilight Zone movie, where several people died during filming from a helicopter that crashed. David Brin. This is all done in camera. I would do I would do these multiple exposures on the spot kind of thing. So we did this as one shot. So this was the first book that I did was a culmination of 15 years of photography, which is strange, right? Because I've been working on this project now for like 30 years, and yet in my head I'm like 20, and so I can't quite put it together yet. So the guy that we photographed was this guy right here, Rick Dottori. And Rick lives in Santa Monica, sitting right here, does a comic strip called One Big Happy. Have you ever seen that in the newspaper? Does anybody read the newspaper? Thank you, sure. I know you're all going, what's a newspaper? But anyway, so Rick was the first one I photographed. That weekend I went down, I met with Scott. He took me to Rick's house. The next house I went to was this gentleman, Sergio Aragones from Mad Magazine, and we did this portrait. And the third portrait we did was of a guy named Jack Kirby. And I ended up, trying to spend as much time as I could at his house, because I thought, when am I ever going to get to hang out with Jack Kirby again? And so I did a whole series of portraits, and this was the one that ended up in the first book. Jack, if you don't know the name, created pretty much the whole Marvel universe with Stan Lee. He created Captain America, the Fantastic Four, the Hulk, the Silver Surfer, Thor. I mean, just pretty much all of the original characters Jack had a hand in. And so it was really a pleasure, and he was just lovely, and I got these shots, and then I just started this process where once a month I would travel down to Southern California, and I would get a phone number for an artist, and I'd call him and I'd say, I'm coming down, can I come take a picture of you in your studio? Getting to meet him was like a highlight, and I didn't realize how nervous I would be, because I knew who Chuck Jones was, and I certainly knew his body of work, but when I got there, I didn't really know what to say to the guy. I was kind of nervous, And so when I get there, we're sitting in his living room with his wife, and he goes, so he starts talking to me. He goes, so how long have you been working on this? And I said, about 10 years. And he goes, well, how come you waited so long to come get me? And I said, I just thought you were untouchable, ungettable. And he looks over at his wife and he winks and he goes, see? And it was just a cool moment, and it kind of broke the ice. And we ended up in his studio, and I'm picking my angle, and in this studio behind me is, so this is his studio, and you can see his Academy Award up there, I think for the line and the dot. And behind me is a bookshelf. And I'm trying to think of something to say, and I'm setting up, and we're setting up lights, and I'm just like starstruck a little, because it's Chuck Jones. And every so often he'd look up, he goes, do you need anything? And I'm like, no, I'm good. You know, and I wish I would have had more to say, but finally I look behind me and there's this whole row of books on this bookshelf, and they're all erotic art books. And I was like, oh, you like erotic art? And he looks up, and he was almost sleeping. He was like, you know, he's kind of working, and he looks up and his eyes sparkle and they're blue, and he goes, who doesn't? And we talked about erotic art for an hour and a half. It was amazing. And I'm just like, this is the best, you know. So for those of you who don't know Al Hirschfeld's work, Al Hirschfeld for 50 years drew for Broadway. And you know his work. It's a very loose style. He has his name, and next to his name is a number, and the number is the amount of times that he put his daughter's name in the picture. And, but he's drawn everybody on Broadway for 50 years at that point. And he had drawn Eric Goldberg, and so Eric was friends. So I said, yes, absolutely, I'd love to go photograph to New York. I have a chance to go to New York. I'd love to photograph Hirschfeld. He sets it up. We go to New York, we do our shot at the casino for a few days, and I drive to New York, and I get to go to Al Hirschfeld's house. Al lives in a house that's 4 stories. It's a brownstone. And as we get to his house, we're introduced, we get inside. She goes, well, he's up on the 4th floor. Okay. So I climb up to the 2nd floor, and I'm walking around. You know, you kind of go up the stairs, and you go around, you go up the stairs. And on the 2nd floor, there's this low table. And there are 6 or 7 stacks of photographs by what I would term the gods of photography of Al Hirschfeld. And I don't know, are there any photo majors here? Okay, so do you know the name Stieglitz, Steichen, Henri Cartier-Bresson? All of these guys were like, in photography terms, these are the gods of photography. These are the guys who made it so big back in the day. And they had all photographed Al Hirschfeld. And I was standing there looking at them, and I started going through them, and I was stumped. Because I thought, I hadn't put together what a big deal it was that I got to photograph Al Hirschfeld. He was that big of a name that everyone tracked him down to do his portrait. And so I almost walked out. I can't do this. And so I had to stand there for 10 minutes and kind of work through my head that this is okay, you're probably not going to do anything new. And as I'm looking through the portraits, I realized that they're all close-ups of Al Hirschfeld, and I'm photographing Al Hirschfeld in his studio. And so this was my shot of Al in his studio. At the end of this shoot, and I don't know if I have a picture in here, when we were done shooting, I said, can you come stand over here in front of the sofa? I'm standing behind the sofa here, and I'm shooting across the studio. Can you come stand here? And he goes, sure. And he gets up and he walks over and he stands and crosses his arms, and I take a picture of him. And I don't really think anything of it. I took 4 frames. And later on, he's 99 here, okay? And so this is potentially the last photograph taken of Al Hirschfeld. I send the pictures to his agent in order to be able to use a piece of his art. And she asked me about those last 4 shots. She goes, tell me about those. And I go, well, you know, when we were done, I said, can you come stand over here? And he stands there, and he crossed his arms. She goes, Greg, I've known him for 25 years. I've never seen him stand. I didn't know he could. So I went through the internet, which we have now, and I looked up pictures of Al Hirschfeld, and I may have the only photo of Al Hirschfeld to actually stand. Who knew, you know? No one ever asked him to stand up before, I guess. So,
right?
Huh?
So did you ask him what the deal was with the barber chair?
So it's kind of a fake. Now, I didn't ask him, but he had worked in the barber chair for 50 years. He said, I didn't ask him. Do you know the story?
No, I just know that he drew in a barber chair.
I didn't ever ask him. You see, so many things. This is part of the problem I have. Is there's so many things I want to do and ask, and yet I'm like working, and I did not ask him. I wish I had. But I do have a picture of him in the barber chair. I wish I had asked. After the first book was done, the first book had 101 portraits in it. I had done 155. But because the price point, they only want to do so many portraits in the book. And so I had to edit out 54 portraits from the first book, which was a real sore point for a lot of artists that didn't make the first book. A couple of them dropped out. I did get a nasty letter from one And I was like, no, I'm working on a second book. This is going to be great. I'm trying to upsell the fact that Dark Horse basically said, this is the book we're doing. So I get started on the second part of the book. And by now, photography has changed so much that it's digital. And so your question about color, everything's color. But I still like I have 50 black and white portraits to start with. And so I start desaturating them to black and white. And as I'm desaturating the first set of portraits, I realized that I could desaturate it like 80% and create this color black and white portrait that I like a whole lot more. And so the second book, I start doing these portraits. And so this is the cover of the second book.